Part 11. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocnu. Chapter 101. At night, the bright moonlight was covered by a dark cloud, and the cool evening breeze invaded the city belonging to human survivors. Outside the tall walls was the terrifying zombie kingdom. Some areas in the Yuhei safety zone have restored normal power supply, but it is limited to an area in the most central area, which is an important scientific research base of Yuhei. In addition, only a few streets still emit dim street lights. Many destitute human survivors choose to set up tents under these street lights, just to seek a ray of light after the night. In a two-story villa in the central area, the incomplete moonlight shines through the balcony to the large French windows. Here, Mu-Chiu, wearing a white shirt, is standing in front of the window, holding a cup of fragrant thick coffee in his hand, looking up at the full moon covered by dark clouds in the sky. "It's almost time." Mu-Chiu murmured in a low voice, "It's time to let the soldiers of the Eternal Night Dynasty relax their muscles." Mu-Chiu's mouth curled up slightly, and there was a hint of scarlet in the depths of his eyes. "My things are not so easy to take." A red-faced and fanged evil ghost mask suddenly appeared beside him, and it was entangled with a chilling strange black air. The shadow under Mu-Chiu's feet began to frantically agitate, and as the ink flow surged, a series of black shadows rushed towards the distance from the black hole-like shadow under Mu-Chiu's feet. The incomplete moonlight in the sky seemed to be even deeper. On the streets in the central area of Yuhei Base, several guards were patrolling with guns on their shoulders. Although Yuhei Base has a law called order to maintain stability after the end of the world, there are still many restless survivors who intend to make trouble, so every night, the security work in the base must be particularly strict. A guard shouldered a rifle and yawned boredly, and suddenly he felt his shoulders sink. He looked back suddenly, only to find that it was his companion who was teasing him. The guard was immediately angry and wanted to fight. "Wait, you, look, what is that?" The guard didn't take it seriously, thinking that his companion had scored twice, and stretched out his fist to hit him. Sizzle. The sound of a sharp weapon cutting through the chest was heard, followed by a large amount of red blood seeping out from the chest. The guard turned his head and looked behind him in disbelief, only to see a man dressed in black clothes as a ninja, holding a dagger and stabbing his heart. And behind him, there were countless black-clothed ninjas attacking his companions silently. The guard's throat was choked, his eyes bulged, and blood gushed out. He used up his last strength to shout loudly. "Enemy, enemy attack, enemy attack." In front of the high-rise building of the Yuhei base called the laboratory. This can be said to be the place where the essence of Yuhei's scientific research results is gathered. All of Yuhei's high-tech improved equipment was manufactured here. Therefore, this place is even more important to Xiao Hanyan. There are dozens of soldiers guarding the door, each of them exuding energy fluctuations, and they are all awakened people with superpowers. Under the incomplete moonlight, suddenly, a black shadow rose from the ground in the distance. An awakened person saw the scene and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. But then, the black shadow expanded, and even black shadows appeared on the ground around him. The black shadows continued to rise like bamboo shoots, until they finally grew into black-clad ninjas holding various weapons. The awakened person looked surprised, and just as he was about to speak, a bloodline appeared on his neck. Then, the dense black-clad ninjas fought against other awakened people guarding the laboratory. These awakened ones were horrified to find that the strength of these black-clad ninjas was generally at the level of C level and D level, but after being killed, these black-clad ninjas turned into a ball of black shadows and exploded on the spot, leaving no trace of blood. What kind of monsters are these? They suddenly discovered that after some of their companions were besieged and killed by black-clad ninjas, these black-clad ninjas could actually plunder their supernatural powers, and even their body sizes became the same as their companions. Alarm, press the alarm quickly. The awakened side was immediately caught in a bitter battle, and some awakened ones reacted and immediately pressed the alarm in their hands. But before he pressed the red button, a piercing alarm sounded not far away, a few hundred meters away. That was the location of the exchange office. Then, countless similar sirens sounded at the same time in all directions, accompanied by the screams and wails of the survivors. What made this awakened person despair was that the soldiers in these directions were also caught in a bitter battle. More and more directions were flashing with dazzling red warning lights, and countless black-clad ninjas were constantly shuttling through the base, with blood splattering and screaming wherever they passed. This was obviously a terrorist attack on the entire Yuhei base. Quick, go and ask the senior managers in the base. Just as the awakened people patrolling the base were busy and exhausted, Miuchiu was still leisurely sipping coffee in a two-story villa in the center of Yuhei. However, the shrill sirens came from different directions, and the urgent red light surrounded the entire city. Chiu. Yichi got up from the bed at some point, and she was also awakened by the shrill sirens outside. The girl was wearing a white nightgown, holding a half-person high pink doll in her arms, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and said lazily, "What happened?" Miuchiu smiled slightly, turned around and pinched the girl's delicate face. "It's okay, it will be over soon, go back to sleep." Hearing Miuchiu's words, Yui lay lazily on the bed, and soon her face was sleepy again. Miuchiu turned his head and looked around. The city had fallen into a more chaotic situation at this time. Black-clothed ninjas kept flashing in the streets, attacking the awakened people patrolling nearby, but more black-clothed ninjas rushed towards the center of the base. Taking a sip of coffee, Miuchiu smiled bitterly and shook his head. He really couldn't taste such a luxury as coffee. One of the purposes of dispatching the Black Shadow Core this time was to take back the Flame Crystal Core of the Flame Demon. Of course, it is not too easy to take it back quietly. The invisibility of the snake spell, the super speed of the rabbit spell, and even the mental power can take back the Flame Demon Crystal Core without bloodshed. But doing this is too boring, isn't it? If you make a mistake, you will always have to pay the price. Miuchiu's eyes moved slightly, and he looked up at the incomplete full moon. This action is also a test for Miuchiu. He wants to see what means are there in the Yuhei base. Before, Miuchiu came here to get familiar with the life in the end times, and secondly, he has not yet fully controlled the power of his body. But now Miuchiu's thoughts have changed quietly. He is a little curious about what will happen when these mutated Black Shadow soldiers develop to the limit. If each Black Shadow soldier can strengthen himself by swallowing superpowers, does it mean that each of them has the potential to evolve to the destruction level? An endless army of destruction. Miuchiu suddenly felt a little excited. Yuhei base is very suitable to become the king of the Eternal Night Dynasty, isn't it? Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 102. The fierce sirens echoed over the entire Yuhei base, and the red warning lights became the main color of the survivor city tonight. The dark shadows began to cover the entire base like a fog. On the eaves and in the streets, dense shadows like swimming fish surged in the dark night, and the next moment they suddenly turned into black-clad ninjas holding knives, guns, sticks and clubs, appearing in every corner of the base. What's more terrifying is that some black-clad ninjas have abnormal bodies or possess supernatural powers, plus the countless ordinary ninjas around them who can't be killed, and the patrolling guards in the base are instantly caught in a bitter battle. Quick, go and ask for support from above. Hundreds of guns spewed fire snakes at the black-clad ninjas attacking them, but these guards were surprised to find that the bullets hit these suddenly appearing black-clad ninjas without a trace of blood splattering. After barely concentrating their firepower to knock down a ninja, the latter scattered like a pool of ink. Then, dozens of fearless black-clad ninjas rushed towards the patrolling guards with red eyes. Monster, they are all monsters. The guards unconsciously tightened their guns in their hands, their faces horrified. They had never seen such a fierce and invincible standard army. At the same time, the piercing sirens also awakened many awakened people who were in deep sleep in the base. Some upright and resolute awakened people immediately rushed outside to fight with the black-clad ninjas, vowing to protect the peace of the base to the death. But some shrewd awakened people chose to hide in the corner and watch coldly, staying out of the matter. The panicked survivors were in chaos in the block, surrounded by the fierce fighting figures of black-clad ninjas, high awakened people and guards. The sound of gunfire, wailing, and shouting became the new sounds that echoed through this human base after the sirens. Tianlai Novel Network. In a bright block in Yuhei base. A young man with a buzz cut, strange clothes and a slightly fat body was walking under the street lights, holding a bottle in his hand, followed by several gangster-dressed subordinates. Wang Hao drank the last sip of wine in the bottle and threw the bottle aside fiercely. It's all this Mu Qiu, who made me lose face now. What happened during the day was still vivid in his mind. Mu Qiu slapped him in the face in front of everyone, and then left with Ji Yufeng so openly. Wang Hao, who had always been domineering in Yuhei base, suffered this kind of loss for the first time. Sooner or later, what happened today will fall into the ears of his elder brother Wang Daipen, and then it will not be just a simple matter of losing face. Mu Qiu. Wang Hao's face was red, and he was a little drunk and gritted his teeth and shouted Mu Qiu's name in a voice like a murmur. Brother Hao, no matter how powerful Mu Qiu is, he is just an A-level awakener. How can you be so angry? That's right, find an opportunity to let Brother Ying and Brother Gu act together tomorrow. 2 S-level awakeners can't take down Mu Qiu. The gangsters beside him hurriedly flattered Wang Hao, fearing that this uncle would do something out of the ordinary again, and they would have to be buried together. What is that? Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from one of the gangsters. Everyone looked up and saw a group of ink-like figures appearing under the street lights in the distance. Yes, is it Brother Ying? The way this shadow appeared was very similar to the ability of the shadow, a gangster asked tentatively. The figure under the street light did not speak, and the gangster approached cautiously. Is it Boss Peng who asked us to go back? As soon as the voice fell, the dark figure moved instantly. A scarlet bloodline passed, and the gangster had already fallen to the ground with his neck covered with blood. This scene directly scared Wang Hao and others not far away. The strong smell of blood stimulated their brain nerves through the nasal cavity, and instantly scared them out of their drunkenness. I saw that dozens of spreading black shadows appeared at the feet of the black figure at some point, rising up and turning into black-clothed ninjas. Under the slightly dim street lights, dozens of eyes flashing red light stared directly at Wang Hao and others, and their eyes were filled with endless murderous intent. On the other side, in a tall experimental building in the center of Yuhei. This research base called the laboratory can be said to be the embodiment of all the scientific and technological wisdom of Yuhei. The building was originally converted from a large hospital, with sufficient medical equipment inside, and the researchers gathered a luxurious team of scientists and high-end doctors who survived from the entire Yuhei. Even after close cooperation with another high-tech base, the research equipment here has been upgraded again, making it look like a high-tech research institute in the movie. The building was still lit late at night. In a research room filled with various expensive instruments, an old professor in his 60s was wearing a white coat and swinging the latest instrument in his hand. "Professor, it's so late, you should rest as soon as possible." An assistant beside him saw the old professor working so hard and couldn't help but persuade him. The old professor waved his hand and did not answer. Instead, he looked at the powdery red crystal in front of him with a serious face with the instrument, and looked up at the flickering fluctuations on the instrument screen from time to time. Suddenly, the old professor showed an ecstatic look on his face, and began to dance with joy. "I found it, I found it." This crazy performance immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the laboratory. The old professor pointed to a half-person high-culture dish not far away with great joy. Through the glass on the surface, A palm-sized fiery red crystal core could be clearly seen inside. The crystal core had lines that looked like blood flowing, and it looked vaguely like a beating heart. I found the secret of this crystal core. This is definitely closely related to the fact that the Flame Demon Lord was still alive after his crystal core was dug out. In addition to the flame energy belonging to the Flame Demon, the energy fluctuations inside the crystal core also have a strange, never-before-seen energy fluctuation. All eyes in the laboratory were focused on the old professor. They were all eager to hear from the old professor this important secret that they had been studying for several months without sleep or food. This energy is totally inconsistent with the flame wave in terms of waveform, and it is very inclusive, and can even cover up the flame wave. This strange energy should belong to. But before he finished speaking, the old professor's throat suddenly choked, and blood gushed out from his neck artery, dyeing the white research coat blood red. I saw a black-clothed ninja appear from behind the old professor at some point, pulling out the dagger in his hand, which was still stained with blood. Just when many scientific researchers were horrified and about to scream, countless black-clothed ninjas with red eyes suddenly emerged from the shadows under their feet with sharp blades in their hands. A black-clothed ninja broke the glass containing the Flame Demon crystal core with blood on his hands, and took out the red crystal core that seemed to flow with blood-colored flames on the surface. And the killing behind him continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 103. Boss, something bad is going to happen. In a bar in a certain neighborhood of Yuhei, a gangster with bare arms and tattoos ran to a room in a panic, stood in front of the door and knocked on the door. A woman's gasping and a man's deep roar came from the door. Why the hell are you looking for me at this late hour? The gangster hurriedly explained. Now a group of black ninjas suddenly appeared in the base. Most of them are sea level, but there are also some high-level awakened ones among them. The awakened ones from the law enforcement team and the search team have already fought with them. The voices in the room paused for a moment, then asked, "How are our people?" The gangster replied, "Most of our people are in the bar now, and some restless bones have also asked them to calm down." "Boss, do we want to take action now?" The voices in the room became fierce again, and soon Wang Daipen's disapproving voice came out. "In this case, let's leave this little matter to the shadow leaders. With Ji Yufeng and the law enforcement team, it can be settled." "There's." The gangster responded and turned to leave, but Wang Daipen's stern voice came from behind. "By the way, let Shadow and the others go over later, and let those fools from the law enforcement team get in first." At the same time, Xiao Hanyan, the biggest talker in the Yuhei base, known as the Iceberg Queen, also received the news urgently. She stood in front of a high-rise building and looked down at the noisy and chaotic crowd below. At this moment, Xiao Hanyan frowned. Even she was a little surprised at this time. "Is this the ninja in black that Ji Yufeng talks about?" Wei Ying behind him replied, "Judging from their clothes and abilities, this should be the black-clothed ninja under the force of the Yanjai dynasty. Eternal Night Dynasty." Xiao Hanyan didn't expect that this mysterious force that was still unknown to them would come directly to their door. The Research Institute and Exchange Office have been hit the hardest. Our people are rushing there non-stop. Wei Ying knew that the matter was urgent and informed him of the current situation. "What about the other people on both sides?" Xiao Hanyan turned around. She was worth the troops from the other two forces in Yuhei. Wei Ying frowned and said, "Wang Daipen informed me that he has sent out men, but they have not shown up in the battle until now. As for Zhang Qingwei, he said that all the existing S-class awakened ones have been sent out to perform tasks, and Master Wufa is still practicing meditation in the temple, and he is unable to support the battle now. What on earth is that old fox thinking?" Xiao Hanyan could not hold her breath at this moment. The base was attacked, but the other two forces had such an attitude, which really made her extremely annoyed. Do we need to activate Meow Meow? Wei Ying made a suggestion. No, Meow Meow's current situation is still very unstable. Once it is activated, it will be difficult to stabilize it. Xiao Hanyan's eyes flashed and he rejected Wei Ying's suggestion. Ji Yufeng will lead the team to support the laboratory first. Wei Ying, you will now lead the team to call on the Awakeners and guards of the search team to fight against these ninjas. Even though he was annoyed, Xiao Hanyan issued the order in time. Although in her opinion, these black-clad ninjas, whose general strength was only B level and C level, could not deal a devastating blow to the base. What really made her angry was the attitude of the other two leaders, Zhang Qinggui and Wang Deipen. Xiao Hanyan suppressed the anger that was about to burst out in his eyes, but became more and more determined in a certain idea in his heart. At some point, part of the full moon, which was originally obscured by black clouds, was revealed. By coincidence, he hit the balcony of a two-story villa in Yuhei Base. The coffee in Mu Chiu's hand had reached its bottom at some point. Leaning against the door frame of the floor-to-ceiling window, she could overlook the scenery of the Yuhei Base below. The place was filled with fire caused by the spitting of gunfire, and from time to time there were flashes of black shadows fighting with the awakened ones with their own skills. It's almost time to relax your muscles and bones. Putting down the coffee, Mu Chiu slowly stood up and breathed lazily. The moonlight hit the ground in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting his slender and straight figure. Following the incomplete light, Mu Chiu stepped lightly and reached out to unbutton her shirt, revealing the strong muscle texture underneath. In the center of the chest, a dim mark of the king pattern is printed there. Spiritual fantasy, activate. As Mu Chiu thought, the domineering pattern of the king's mark that flickered with faint light slowly dimmed, and was replaced by a ferocious bloody cross pattern. A black ripple rolled in the void, and a terrifying mask with a red face and fangs appeared in front of Mu Chiu. The surroundings were surrounded by wisps of black demonic energy at some unknown time, which contained scorching flames that burned everything. Slowly picking up the mask and covering it on her face, a red color visible to the naked eye appeared in Mu Chiu's eyes. A pair of dark and wide demon wings spread out behind her back, and a wave of scorching black flames stirred in the back wings. Fluctuate. GGG, WWW. In just a few breaths, the arrogant and domineering Yanjai Shura appeared in the world again. Shuro let out a ferocious smile, his eyes were red, his back wings fluttered, he swooped down from the balcony, and rushed towards a certain direction directly in front of him. Team Leader. Ji Yufeng led the law enforcement team to the building called the laboratory, but found that it was already in a mess, with blood and corpses everywhere, and even various high-precision equipment was completely destroyed. A member of the law enforcement team behind him exclaimed, and Ji Yufeng slowly turned his head, only to see a black shadow monster that looked like a leopard man swinging its arm to hit his head. The surrounding space vibrated, and Ji Yufeng's figure flashed and disappeared directly on the spot. The black shadow leopard man's attack missed, and the red color in his eyes did not diminish, but a hot laser passed behind him. There was no scream, and even no blood was sprayed. The black shadow leopard man exploded into a shadow and disappeared. Ji Yufeng, who had already seen the ability of the Black Shadow Army, was not surprised, and turned to attack the strange-looking black shadow monsters that appeared around him. Ji Yufeng's figure flashed with white vortexes. He just got rid of a black shadow monster, but a violent and hot black flame brushed past his side face. SHHHH, long time no see. White Death. A familiar voice with a hint of arrogance and a bit of playfulness suddenly echoed in Ji Yufeng's ears. Created a group, Wu, Ju, Ling, Yi, Shi, Ju, Lu, Yi. Password, not short, bored friends can add it to play around. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 104. Long time no see, White Death. The scorching black flame swept over with a terrifying aura that devoured all things, and the scorching heat contained in it could still be felt even from hundreds of meters away. Ji Yufeng looked up and saw a familiar figure appearing in the sky not far away. He was still shirtless, wearing a ferocious mask with a red face and fangs, and strange patterns painted on his chest. He wears a black cloak on his lower body, with a pair of wide black wings on his back, and is surrounded by extremely aggressive black flames. He looks like a Shura Yaksha crawling out of the endless hell. Shura. Ji Yufeng's long-lasting stern face finally changed, and he spat out two cold words from his mouth with a solemn expression. Shishi shishi. There was a dark chuckle coming from under the Shura mask. The next second, a strong wind flashed past Shura's mask, followed by two fierce lasers with cold murderous intent. Without any nonsense, Ji Yufeng directly chose to take action. The cold and fast laser sword passed through the air and took Shura's head directly. The whole process happened in an instant, without giving anyone any chance to react, but Shura, who was wearing a devil mask, seemed to have expected it. His back wings trembled and a scorching flame swept through his side. As soon as Ji Yufeng's figure emerged from the white vortex beside Shura, he was greeted by a ball of fierce black flames. Immediately afterwards, a long black knife filled with black energy slashed down from the other side. Ji Yufeng's pupils shrank, and he didn't care about the assassination attack. In a flash, he appeared hundreds of meters away from Shura. That's not all you have, right, the white god of death in Yuhei. The masked man Shura's arrogant and teasing words came. Ji Yufeng raised his head and frowned slightly as he looked at the strong body in front of him surrounded by black flames. He had seen the strength of the masked man in the club building before, but after this real fight, Ji Yufeng realized that Shura was far more difficult than he expected. Agile speed, extraordinary reflexes, impressive strength, black wings, and black flames with destructive attack power. All signs indicate that the Shura in front of him is a powerful being at the top even among S-class awakened ones. Ji Yufeng took a deep breath, took out a square copper box from his arms, took out two capsules of medicine inside and swallowed them. This is a human enhancement potion produced by research in the laboratory. His spatial ability is indeed an excellent top-level ability, but while he can attack and defend freely, he also has great limitations. That is because Ji Yufeng's own strength is weak and it is difficult to cause high damage to a super strong enemy at one time. Taking this drug can greatly enhance his strength and reaction speed in a short period of time. Coupled with his ability to come and go without a trace and his powerful spatial abilities, he is absolutely invincible when dealing with strong men of the same level. Of course, this kind of drug will not only enhance his strength, but also have severe side effects. While enduring severe pain in the body, it will also cause some irreversible damage to the organs. You can be convinced that this drug is exchanging life for powerful power. Ji Yufeng swallowed the medicine as if he was familiar with the road, and his body was instantly shaken. The sharp pain made him curl up uncontrollably with the clear joints holding the sword hilt. A powerful wave of strange energy emitted from Ji Yufeng's body. At the same time, a certain look of determination appeared on the pale face of this famous white god of death. Whoosh! White steam emerged from the surroundings, and the white figure like the god of death appeared in front of the masked man Shura again. But this time, dozens of powerful laser sword energy followed. The ferocious blue laser almost formed a curtain of light, attacking Shura like a meat grinder harvesting life, without giving the latter any chance to react. This light screen-like blade storm alone is enough to cut into pieces the body of any A-level heretic. But Shura had no intention of dodging at all. He raised the long knife in his hand that was dark and glowing with blood lines. It was surrounded by domineering black flames that seemed to be alive, and he directly fought with Ji Yufeng's laser sword. The black and blue races began to intersect and collide in the air, and countless survivors on the ground looked at the fierce duel above like gods. As a result, Everyone saw the black flames surging around the masked man, like a desperate wave swallowing the sky. Ji Yufeng's white figure kept flashing in the surrounding whirlpool, and the blue laser beam kept swimming in the black flames. Cutting. Compared with Ji Yufeng's flexible dodge, Shura's attack method was open and close without any rules. He completely gave up all his own defense, and all his attacks were crazy attacks with fatal killing intent. But it was such a life-threatening and violent attack like a madman, mixed with black flames with astonishing destructive power. The airtight attack made it difficult for Ji Yufeng to attack for a while. Go and help the captain deal with him first. A smart member of the law enforcement team recognized at a glance that the masked man was the leader of this group of black ninjas, and immediately clamored to help Ji Yufeng kill the masked man known as Shura. They are not stupid enough to pay attention to fair duels. The most effective way now is to concentrate fire to deal with the leader, and then kill these black ninjas one by one. The dense bullets on the ground were shooting at Shura, and at the same time, several awakened people with flying ability also attacked the vital points of the masked man from all directions with weapons in hand. Almost all the attacks have blocked Shura's retreat. No one thinks Shura has any chance of escaping, even if he is an S-level awakened person. Ji Yufeng's eyes flashed, and his body swayed and appeared dozens of meters away, instantly dodging the dense bullets like rain. Facing the deadly attack towards him, Shura laughed wildly. With the arrogant and unruly low laughter, the black flames condensed around Shura instantly condensed and rose to a terrifying level, directly wrapping Shura like a fire curtain. A surprising scene happened. The high-speed rotating hard bullets hit the black fire curtain and turned into cotton candy. Without exception, they all dissolved outside the fire curtain, and even the corners of the masked man's clothes were not stained. Shura's black back wings fluttered violently, and a whistling sound of breaking through the air came. The pitch-black blade in his hand, wrapped in the domineering black flames on the fire curtain, chopped directly at the law enforcement team members flying in the air. These law enforcement team members were at least B-level strongmen, and the top few had even reached the level of A-level, but even so, they could not resist the domineering black flames that could burn everything, and they were swallowed and burned into pieces of charred slag in the blink of an eye. Just after dealing with several members of the law enforcement team, Shura's figure slowly landed on the ground. At this moment, a shadow like ink suddenly attacked from the ground under his feet in the distance, and a hoarse and sinister laugh came. Finally, I waited for you. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 105. Jajaja. A sinister laugh came from the ground, and then a huge thorn suddenly pierced Shura's feet. Shura swung the blade in his hand and cut off the huge black thorn that suddenly appeared under his feet. Shura's strong body stood tall and straight, and when his feet shook hard, cracks appeared in the ground around him, and the overbearing black flames penetrated into the ground like a pervasive force. A painful wailing sound instantly came from the ground under Shura's feet. An extremely fast black shadow slid out from the ground and emerged on the ground in the distance as a pitch-black figure with a scorched body. Shadow looked at the shirtless masked man in front of him with a horrified look. He never expected that the black flames would be so terrifying. The terrifying attitude of eating away everything like gangrene attached to the bones really frightened him. He even felt that if he escaped from the ground 1 second later, he would be swallowed up by the clinging flames. Flames of this nature have never appeared even in the hands of his boss, Wang Daipen. Ji Yufeng's figure appeared next to Shadow, who asked in panic, "What kind of monster is this?" Ji Yufeng didn't reply, but looked at the masked man Shura in front of him with burning eyes. "What is the purpose of your attack on the base?" Even though Shura's strength is indeed tyrannical and is at the top level among S-levels, Ji Yufeng does not think that the power of Shura and these black-clad ninjas alone can cause a devastating blow to Yuhei. Shura did not speak directly, but smiled and said, "If you think this can delay time, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." Ji Yufeng's eyes flashed and he looked at the laboratory building behind Shura, already having a guess in his mind. What nonsense are you talking to him about? Hurry up and do it to him, Tianlai Novel Network. When Shadow saw Ji Yufeng's arrival, he felt relieved. He didn't believe that the two of them could not defeat a masked man with his head hidden. Ji Yufeng held up the mirror frame. No matter what the other party's purpose was, the current primary goal was to deal with the Shura in front of him first. There were strange space ripples oscillating around it, and the monsoon wind flashed frequently in the space, fighting with Shura again. Ji Yufeng's own strength is not outstanding. Even after taking potion, he is still no match for the masked man. But fortunately, the existence of space powers makes his speed extremely flexible, which makes him undefeated in a short period of time. Come down. The two incorporeal special weapons, the laser sword blade and the jet black blade, were mixed and collided in the black air, and the sparks generated by the high-speed friction kept flying in the air. At a certain moment, a dark figure emerged from the ground, holding a short dagger, and attacked the back of Shura's neck. Shura didn't even raise his head, and a wave of black flames erupted from his back wings, and accidentally hit Shadow's body from the front. The Shadow let out another miserable cry. This time he could not avoid it, and the originally dark flesh and blood on his body began to be violently burned by the black flames. Black flames like gangrene on the bones were about to climb up the arm. A flash of determination flashed in Shadow's eyes, and he cut off one of his arms with a wave of his hand. After a moment of numbness, severe pain came from the body. Shadow quickly took out an injection from his arms and injected it into the body in a panic. This time, the injury was temporarily relieved. Shadow looked at the masked Shura who was fighting Ji Yufeng with hatred. He was the one who destroyed one of his arms. The flame of hatred burned in Shadow's heart. He didn't take any rest, and his body melted into the Shadow on the ground in a flash. The Shadow that glided on the ground as fast as a whale shark in the sea plunged into the figure at the feet of Shura who was fighting. This is his superpower, Mo Ying's biggest secret, turning himself into a part of the enemy's shadow. Only then does he become a true shadow killer who can threaten any life. Even though the enemy tries hard, it is difficult to harm the shadow at all, but the shadow can appear behind the enemy all the time like a gangrene attached to the bone and deliver a fatal blow. It follows the enemy like a shadow, giving the enemy the deepest fear. Mu Qiu, who was under the Shura mask, was certainly aware of the shadow's actions, but Mu Qiu did not stop him at all. Instead, a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The shadow has made up its mind. As long as Shura makes any mistakes in the battle with Ji Yufeng, he will take the opportunity to appear from the shadow under Shura and give him a fatal blow. What is this place? As soon as the shadow plunged into the shadow of the masked man named Shura, he found that he did not appear in the dark shadow space as usual. There was a dark red world in front of him, and shadows were suspended in the air, looking at the strange space in front of him in horror. The mountains were in an upside-down shape, and some scary-looking monsters floated from time to time in the yellow-green space. He had never seen such a weird shadowy space. Suddenly, an orange-red masked head appeared in the void in front of the shadow. You were the one who killed my ghost general. The heavy voice with a hint of anger directly shook Shadow's mind. The face of this mask exudes a terrifying aura that scares even an S-class awakened person like him. Who are you? Shadow asked with a horrified look on his face. I am the lord of this Shadow Kingdom, Terra. This was the last sound Shadow heard. Since the Shadow entered the shadow at Shura's feet and never came out again, the keen Ji Yufeng has noticed something abnormal. What surprised him even more was that the force coming from the black blade in front of him was getting stronger and stronger, so strong that even if he took the potion, he could hardly continue. On the other hand, Shura still looked calm and composed, and bursts of low and sinister laughter came from under the hideous ghost mask. This feeling was like a cat playing with a caught mouse. Ji Yufeng frowned, knowing that he would be defeated sooner or later if he continued like this. The scorching black flames attacked, and the white figure flashed by and floated in the void. The supernatural power fluctuations around Ji Yufeng began to surge wildly, and dozens of white vortices suddenly appeared around Shura, and Ji Yufeng's afterimage emerged from these dozen vortices. It was so real and fake that it was hard to tell which one was Ji Yufeng's real body, or whether these dozen figures were all Ji Yufeng. Oh! That move! Mu Qiu's face under the mask flashed with a playful look. I created a group: dance, wine, age, clothes, wine, walk, clothes. Password, not short. Friends who are bored can come in and play. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Yu. Chapter 106. Feeling the shrill screams coming from the shadow behind him, Mu Qiu's face under the Shura mask did not show any ripples. While activating the mask's power, Mu Qiu's dark side also communicated with the passage to the Black Shadow Kingdom. At this time, the shadow threw itself into the shadow behind Mu Qiu, which was tantamount to seeking death. Tianlai Novel Network. Mu Qiu knew very well what existed in the dark Black Shadow Kingdom. The ruler of the Black Shadow Kingdom, the master of the 9 ghost generals, Terra. Of course, Terra could also sense the demise of the ghost general Nijia, and even noticed the existence of Mu Qiu. The reason why Terra did not come out through the shadow channel to settle accounts with Mu Qiu was because Terra was also afraid of Mu Qiu, a destructive existence. Black Shadow Kingdom, I can go and see it if I have a chance. A gleam of light flashed in Mu Qiu's eyes under the mask, and he was also very interested in the other 8 legions of the Black Shadow Kingdom. But now, Mu Qiu raised his head and looked at the dazzling lasers that were gradually condensing towards him. There was a white figure standing vaguely at the source of each beam of light. And now, he was in the center of these dozens of hot lasers. Back then, in the alien sex base in Lannan City, the S-level human-faced demon spider and many powerful beings including Su Feng were defeated by this move of dozens of powerful lasers. And at this moment, the dozens of white afterimages surrounding Mu Qiu swayed, and the space vortex behind him was also constantly shaking. I saw dozens of huge beams of light swish cutting through the sky, and the hot beams of light shot towards Mu Qiu with a terrifying momentum that could tear everything apart. The laser shooting with nearly 360 degrees without dead angles, once it exploded, the speed was even several times faster than bullets. Just as Ji Yufeng, who was constantly shuttling among dozens of afterimages, shot out the laser, he suddenly stopped and stared at the black figure below. The laser contains the energy of several A-level heretic crystal cores, which, combined with the compression of his spatial ability, can condense and launch, enough to kill an S-level existence on the spot. What puzzled Ji Yufeng was that the masked man who called himself Shura below was not moved at all by the dozens of lasers in front of him. His strong shoulders and arms were twisted, holding the black long sword. I saw Shura suddenly insert the long sword in his hand with black flames straight into the ground. The ground under Shura's feet was instantly torn apart by a huge force that could move mountains. Spiderweb-like cracks spread along the ground where the long sword was inserted, and Shura's arrogant and domineering roar came with it. Shura! As the arrogant voice reached the ears of everyone present, many members of the law enforcement team felt that the bluestone ground under their feet was like an earthquake, and the spiderweb cracks had actually cracked to their feet. Purgatory. The next second, a series of fiercely burning fire pillars suddenly erupted from the cracks under Shura's feet. Along with the fire pillars, there was also black mist that continued to emerge from the shadows underground, rising up along the fire pillars, wrapped in scorching flames, like an ominous fire from the netherworld. What's more terrifying is that from the cracks that were cracking inch by inch and the black flames that were constantly rising in the underground gap, There were faint eerie screams that came to everyone's ears intermittently. The violently rising netherworld black fire instantly wrapped Shura's body, and the dozens of hot lasers that hit the flame wall cast by the nether fire were swallowed up in an instant like a drop in the ocean. Immediately afterwards, countless black hot flame pillars were sprayed out from the cracks that spread to the feet of the awakened members of the surrounding law enforcement team. When it comes to the human body, it's like a thorn in the flesh, and it swallows and burns the bodies of many awakened people in an instant. The building of the laboratory collapsed, and the scorching temperature burned the walls and turned them into charred gravel. Black slag and bloody powder flew in the air, and the painful wails of the awakened on the ground and the faint screams from underground responded in coordination, like a symphony with a sad theme. Ji Yufeng's figure kept shuttling in the surrounding white vortex, avoiding the terrifying black flames from the netherworld, which were full of the power to devour everything. This white death god, who had always been calm in the face of change, had a look of shock in his eyes at this moment. This kind of black flame with an ominous aura and amazing destructive power, he had never seen it even on Wang Daipen, the destructive awakener called Scorching Sun in the base. The dark clouds on the horizon gradually covered the full moon, and the cold and humid air came, with a faint moist breath. The center of the base was blasted with artillery fire, and countless black-clad ninjas on the ground were still harvesting lives. Even many battle-hardened awakeners could not resist these fearless shadow monsters. The smell of blood and the smell of gunpowder continued to spread in the base, and screams and roars echoed in everyone's ears. At this moment, a scorching fire flashed across a street in Yuhei City. I saw a fiercely burning red motorcycle speeding from the end of the street, with billowing flames burning from the front to the rear of the car, and even dragging a long chain of fire on the path behind. This motorcycle was extremely swift and fast, and its ultimate goal was exactly the direction of the laboratory. From time to time, many figures of black-clad ninjas appeared in the darkness along the way, either possessing supernatural powers or holding weapons and attacking the motorcycle. But without exception, before they even got close to the red motorcycle, they were burned like lava around the motorcycle. Burning in flames. A black-clothed ninja who had just absorbed a huge A-class awakener rushed from the front, and his huge body rushed towards the motorcycle like a bison. Court death. Suddenly, a voice full of anger came from the car, and as the voice roared, the surrounding flames were rising steadily. The flame motorcycle sprayed out a large ball of flames, which directly penetrated the huge body of the black-clothed ninja with an irresistible force. The person on the red motorcycle is none other than Wang Daipen, one of the three major destroyers of Yuhei Base, the leader of the Shenglong Society with the title of Burning Sun. Wang Daipen originally didn't take the attack on the base seriously, and even intended to weaken Xiao Hanyan's strength. But the news just now made Wang Daipen furious. He was so angry that he rushed out without caring about the situation. His younger brother Wang Hao had just been killed by the black-clad ninja under this mysterious force. Wang Daipen knew in his heart how incompetent Wang Hao was, but this force dared to kill his own brother in Wang Daipen's territory, which was tantamount to slapping him in the face in public. Whether they were black-clad ninjas or survivors from the base, those blocking the road were all burned to death by the endless fury released from the motorcycle. Looking at the laboratory building getting closer and closer, a powerful energy wave emanated from it, and the scorching temperature of the flame could still be vaguely felt in the air. In the spreading underground cracks, countless black karma fires from the netherworld and purgatory are constantly spurting upward. Among them, a shirtless figure with wings on his back is extremely eye-catching. Wang Daipen, who was so angry, couldn't think about it at all. As the motorcycle gears rotated crazily, Wang Daipen's arms began to swell violently, and deep red lines like lava emerged. Wang Daipen jumped up from the car, crimson flames spurted out from his body, and his arms swelled several times. The whole person was like a violently burning meteorite, hitting Shure who was standing in the boundless black flames. Die to me. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 107. Mu Qiu, who was in the netherworld black flame, was not affected by the devouring power at all, and even felt that his body was being tempered by the 9 netherworld fiery fire. Not far in front of him, Ji Yufeng, known as the White God of Death, had already become in a miserable state. The neat white suit was all burnt black, and even the frame was broken on one side, and one of the lenses was broken, completely losing his previous indifferent demeanor. Ji Yufeng was panting heavily, his white palms tightly covering his chest, and subconsciously looking at the copper box on his collar. There was also a potion that could greatly improve his strength. Ji Yufeng knew in his heart that it was difficult for him to bear the side effects of the drug again in his current situation, but he had no choice now. Mu Qiu under the Shura mask noticed Ji Yufeng's hesitation and had guessed his thoughts. But Mu Qiu no longer had the interest to play with Ji Yufeng. Seriously speaking, Ji Yufeng was a very responsible law enforcer, but that was all. The demon's wings fluttered slightly, and in the next moment he would devour the White God of Death with boundless fire. But at this moment, the figure of a black-clothed ninja appeared behind him. The black-clothed ninja suddenly knelt on one knee, holding a palm-sized fiery red crystal core in his hand. The crystal core was covered with fiery red lines flowing like blood, and a familiar energy emanated from it. At the same time, the flame demon lord in the body seemed to sense something at the same time, holding the cage that trapped his body tightly, his eyes were red and roaring continuously. Mu Qiu took the red crystal core, felt the majestic flame power contained in it, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Strictly speaking, this was the main purpose of his trip. The secondary purpose was to test the true strength of the Yuhei base, but what puzzled Mu Qiu was that until now, the Yuhei base had not shown the strength that could make him afraid. Die for me! A roar filled with anger suddenly sounded from a distance. Then, a figure burning with flames, like a meteorite, rushed from a distance. Wang Deipen's arms grew wildly to the size of giant hammers, with cracks like flowing magma engraved on them, and the explosive power contained in them even burned the surrounding air hot and dry. Is it finally here? Feeling the destructive fluctuations coming from the front, Mu Qiu became even more excited. Holding the flame crystal core in his hand, absorbing the constant flow of strange energy from it, Mu Qiu did not even use the power of the fire demon in his body. The dark black flames gushing from the underground purgatory were condensed in front of Mu Qiu, forming a black flame barrier flowing with deep and ominous fire. Wang Deipen, wrapped in the fiery red raging flames, smashed heavily on the black flame barrier with his fists like a pendulum. In an instant, the fiery red flames and the deep black flames intertwined and collided together, and a strong flame wave swept the entire laboratory. The originally moist air suddenly became dry, and the walls of the surrounding houses began to crack. Layers of debris continued to fly from the rubble, and even the few remaining awakened people were annihilated by the heat wave in an instant. The cracked ground under Shura's feet quickly collapsed under the huge force of the fire wave, but the strange thing was that the masked man Shura, who was attacked head-on by the destructive force, did not move at all. Wang Deipen's attack did not even break the black flame barrier in front of him. Wang Deipen's fierce face changed. He actually felt a little pressure from this S-level awakener. Wang Deipen, who did not believe in evil, instantly broke out with hotter flames. He was like a sun that never dried up. As the energy continued to grow, the temperature of the flames in his body would continue to rise. The large area of scorching flames gradually turned into a deep red like magma. Ordinary people would be burned into slag by the surrounding scorching heat just by getting close. But Wang Deipen found that his flames hitting the black flame barrier were like mud flowing into the sea. Not only did it not break the barrier, but part of the flames were even absorbed and swallowed by the strange black flames. How is it possible? An S-level awakener actually blocked his angry attack. Wang Deipen couldn't help but calm down. He suddenly observed that the masked man was holding a fiery red crystal core in his hand, with a good energy fluctuation flowing on it. Flame Demon Crystal Core. Wang Deipen was naturally aware of the existence of this crystal core. Although it was only at the S level, the flame energy contained in it was also very attractive to him. Even for him, a destructive level existence, it would be of great benefit to absorb this crystal core. He had asked the laboratory for it many times but was rejected, but he had already labeled it as his own in his heart. Unexpectedly, this crystal core is now in the hands of the masked man Shura. For a moment, the dual psychology of jealousy continued to expand in Wang Deipen's heart. The most obvious manifestation was that the color of the flames bursting out from his body became brighter red, like flowing magma blood. I didn't expect that the top combat power of Yuhei destruction level was only at this level. A ball of deep black flame suddenly emerged from Shura's palm, directly swallowing up the red crystal core in his hand, and turned to sneer at Wang Deipen. Wang Deipen's eyes were wide open. Since the outbreak of the apocalypse, this was the first time he met someone who dared to talk to him like this. "Boy, you are looking for death." Shura's ridicule was like adding fuel to the fire. Wang Deipen's eyes turned red with anger. "Let me show you what the real destructive power is." Wang Deipen raised his arms, and a group of deep red fire clouds gathered above his head, gradually gathering into a huge fireball like the scorching sun. Under the halo inside the fireball, a huge golden crow several people tall could be vaguely seen flapping its wings. As Wang Deipen punched out, the big sun golden crow also smashed towards Shura like a scorching sun. At the same time, the masked man Shura seemed to sense something. A black hole surrounded by ink-colored flames suddenly erupted in the void in front of him, and a gloomy breath emanated from the deep and empty black hole. Suddenly, a violent long groan came from the mouth of the black flame cave, and the shocking sound rushed straight into the mind. I saw a ferocious black dragon composed of black flames, several feet long, roaring out from the mouth of the netherworld cave, and rushing straight towards the golden crow's scorching sun. At this moment, the sky of Yuhei base was illuminated by blazing flames. Skirt, dance, wine, age, clothes, wine, walk, clothes. Password, not short. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 108. In the groggy night, suddenly a huge concussive wave came from somewhere. The violent wind wave accompanied by the hot air invaded the faces of the people around him. Then, what is that? A dazzling ray of light shone in everyone's eyes. The surviving humans suddenly looked up, only to see a soaring golden crow glowing with fire in the rising sun on the horizon. Opposite the golden crow Deipen, there turned out to be a mighty and domineering ink-colored dragon whose scales were wrapped in black flames, as if it had rushed out of the abyss of hell. Roar! The huge black flame dragon and the burning sun golden crow collided in the air, like two huge waves rolling and facing each other. Boom! The black and red tones collide fiercely in the sky, lighting up the distant sky like the dawn after dawn. A violent explosion came from the direction of the laboratory building. The thick smoke and the extremely hot wave immediately collapsed the surrounding high-rise buildings. The few survivors nearby were annihilated into dregs by this explosive and scorching wave. That flame, is it Wang Deipen? Xiao Hanyan also saw this shocking and terrifying explosion in a high-rise building several kilometers away from the center of the explosion. Relying on the powerful energy coming out of it, Xiao Hanyan immediately deduced that it was the destruction level Wang Deipen who had taken action. Xiao Hanyan thought for a moment, took out the walkie-talkie on the table, and said to the other side. Wang Deipen has taken action. The situation has changed. Don't activate Meow Meow until the situation is out of control. On the other side of the intercom, Wei Ying, who was only a few hundred meters away from the experimental building, looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Just behind the guard eagle, several huge armored tanks were driving impressively, and there were hundreds of guard members armed with high-tech equipment around them, ready to go. Just one shot of these high-tech equipment such as laser guns is enough to kill a C-class heretic. After a while, the subordinate next to him suddenly said in surprise, "Captain, look at those ninjas." Wei Ying finally regained his composure and looked at the surrounding black-clothed ninjas who were fighting the awakened ones in the base. He was shocked to find that these ninjas seemed to have lost their backbone. At the moment of the explosion, each one turned into a black shadow and fled underground, disappearing without a trace in an instant. The ground in the distance was empty except for the mottled blood stains and the fallen awakened ones. Is it over? Wei Ying frowned and looked at the miraculous scene in front of him from a distance, but the shock in his eyes could not fade for a long time. Is this the strength of a destructive level powerhouse? It's really terrifying. A deafening explosion came from the center of the laboratory building, followed by thick smoke, covering the entire laboratory area. Suddenly, a white swirling light curtain emerged from the sky. After several battles, Ji Yufeng, dressed in shabby clothes, walked out of the whirlpool in embarrassment. His original white suit had been completely dyed black, and the glasses he was wearing were thrown away. Ji Yufeng felt the aftermath of the explosion in front of him with a solemn expression. The violent collision, like the sky collapsing and the earth collapsing, had already completely destroyed the experimental building that had been repaired not long ago. The ground is also filled with craters created after the explosion, and there are still black or red high-temperature flames burning on them. The collapsed ruins look like purgatory on Earth. Even Ji Yufeng didn't expect that Shura's strength was so terrifying, and that a single blow against Wang Daipen could cause such an astonishing explosion. A figure with blazing feet and blazing fire flying out of the smoke of the explosion. This man was thin and had dark skin, but his body was wrapped in scorching fire. He looked like a god of fire who had descended from the world. It is none other than the Burning Sun King Daipen, one of the 3 destructive level beings in Yuhei. Let him run away. That boy is not simple. Wang Daipen walked out of the flames with an ugly expression, covering his normal wrist, which was scorched black by an inexplicable black fire at some point. He, a person with fire powers, was actually burned by fire. But this was not what frightened Wang Daipen the most. What really shocked Wang Daipen was the fight just now. He actually felt an energy fluctuation from the opponent's black flame that was far beyond the ordinary S-level awakened ones. That was destruction level. A trace of ferocity flashed in Wang Daipen's eyes. Yanjai Dynasty, Shura. Now even he had to start to face up to this mysterious organization that he had never heard of. The communicator in Ji Yufeng's arms vibrated, and when he opened it, he was shocked to learn that the black-clothed ninjas had retreated. There was no trace of joy on Ji Yufeng's face after hearing the good news. He raised his head and looked at the thick smoke that lingered after the explosion. He had an incomprehensible look in his eyes, and he didn't know what he was thinking. A golden outline streaked across the sky of Yuhei base, and the rising sun was slowly showing its signs at this moment. It seemed that it was also afraid of the earth-shattering and destructive explosion not long ago. Dawn broke in the sky, and weak sunlight shone on the ground. Countless humans who had survived a night of fierce fighting dragged their exhausted bodies and looked at the rising sun in the sky as if they were surviving a disaster. It's finally dawn. The flames of war and gunpowder filled the night, and they were extremely lucky to have survived the battle. In the familiar second-floor villa of Yuhei Center, Yui, who was wearing a white dress, had woken up at some point and was sitting on the sofa on the first floor, holding her beautiful face in a daze. Suddenly, the door handle made a click sound. Yui seemed to sense something, stood up from the sofa and walked quickly towards the door of the villa. The door of the villa was opened from the outside, and Mu-Chiu walked in slowly from outside. He was still wearing a black windbreaker, a white shirt inside, clean and tidy, and even his face looked calm, without the slightest sense of fatigue. From the outside, it is hard to believe that this man had just experienced a shocking battle last night. He held a bag in his hand, which contained some bread and sausages that he didn't know where he got from. Muchi rubbed the girl's head, carried the bag, and said with a faint smile on his face. I'm a little tired, so I'll just make do with it this morning. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 109. 182 members of the law enforcement team died in the battle last night, and the casualties of awakened people and ordinary people in the base are not clear yet. At present, it seems that the casualties of ordinary people are lighter in comparison. In an office in a high-rise building in the center of Yuhei base, a dozen humans are sitting here for talks. The one who is reporting on the invasion last night is Wei Ying, the leader of the guard team under Xiao Hanyan. Wei Ying's eyes were sharp, and he analyzed the events of last night very sharply. The actions of those black-clothed ninjas were very clear. Their main target of attack was the awakened ones with superpowers. After killing the awakened ones, they could absorb the superpowers of the dead through strange abilities. But the most seriously attacked were the newly built laboratory building and the exchange office where the search team conducted transactions. Professor Li, the captain of the medical team and the chief researcher of the laboratory, unfortunately died in the incident last night. Several researchers who were conducting experiments also died with him. The laboratory building was completely destroyed in the battle last night. As for the mysterious Yanjai dynasty, my guard team is still searching for intelligence and has not obtained any substantial information for the time being. Hearing Wei Ying's precise report word by word, many Yuhei senior officials present also showed solemn expressions on their faces. If it is said that the most serious losses of Yuhei base this time are not the manpower of the law enforcement team, nor the middle and high-level awakened ones, but the high-end scientific research talents and the laboratory building full of high-tech instruments. The knowledge of exploring the mysteries of superpowers and novel equipment is recorded in the experimental building, not to mention that there are still many unfinished scientific research projects. Now all the hard work that Yuhai has put in for the past 2 years has been destroyed overnight. How can this not make these senior executives sad? Everyone looked at each other. After last night's battle, they all clearly understood that a confidant enemy no less powerful than the heterogeneous religion had appeared. Eternal Night Dynasty. This mysterious force that had never been heard of before had a sudden attack, which brought heavy losses to the Yuhai base. What's more terrifying is that what this force has revealed so far is just the tip of the iceberg. Xiao Hanyan sat in the center of these senior executives, with an unprecedented cold face. He slapped the table and said angrily, "I need you to explain to me what you were doing when the base was attacked last night." Originally, with the current capabilities of the Yuhai base, even if there was a sudden attack like last night, as long as the defense was timely, those black-clothed ninjas with generally low strength would not pose much of a threat. But the problem is that in the attack last night, it was basically Xiao Hanyan's side that fought back hard, and the other two forces were either slacking off or hiding their incompetence, which was what made Xiao Hanyan most angry. Xiao Hanyan could ignore the losses after this attack, but she could not accept the despicable attitude of the other two forces who stood by and watched. Wang Deipen leaned on the chair with his legs crossed, but replied, "Hanyan, you can't say that. I tried my best and ended up losing my shadow. The cost of losing an S-level awakener is really not small." Xiao Hanyan glanced at Wang Deipen but did not speak. She knew clearly what Wang Deipen did at the first time. He deliberately suppressed his manpower to weaken Xiao Hanyan's strength. Unexpectedly, he failed to steal the chicken and lost the rice and lost an S-level awakener. Then, Xiao Hanyan looked at the middle-aged man who had been sitting on the other side with a kind smile on his face and a big belly. The kind-looking middle-aged man is the leader of another faction in Yuhei, and also the founder of many rules and orders in Yuhei, the wealthy businessman Zhang Qinggui. Zhang Qinggui was stared at by Xiao Hanyan, but he was not panicked at all, and his face was still smiling like Maitreya. Niece Hanyan, you also know the situation here. The high-level awakeners under my command are still on missions outside, and Master Wufa is still at the critical moment of practicing Zen. I can't send any available manpower for a while. Zhang Qinggui's explanation was airtight, and it seemed that there was no problem, but Xiao Hanyan knew that this old fox must still be hiding his shortcomings. But the base had already suffered heavy losses, and arguing with them was useless. Xiao Hanyan's side could only swallow this loss. You were elected to your current position because of your own abilities and the hopes of the Yuhei survivors. What you should do is to fulfill your duties, rather than shirking your responsibilities when things happen. The redemption plan is coming, and the Zilan base has also received relevant information. I don't want the base to suffer any more blows at this critical moment. As he said this, Xiao Hanyan looked around at the Yuhei senior management with a cold gaze, implying a sense of deterrence. Many high-level people who felt guilty lowered their heads unconsciously when they were stared at by this gaze. Wait. At this moment, Wang Daipen, who was idle on the side, suddenly sat up straight, looked at Xiao Hanyan and said, "Since the matter last night has come to an end, Hanyan, shouldn't you also explain to me that my search team was killed in the ruins?" Xiao Hanyan's cold eyes flashed, "What do you want to say? If I remember correctly, that Mu Qiu should be one of your subordinates, right?" Wang Daipen said, with a murderous look in his eyes, "My confidant was killed by Mu Qiu outside, but there are witnesses. Shouldn't you give me an explanation about this matter?" Wang Daipen is a very protective person, not to mention that this newcomer named Mu Qiu slapped his brother Wang Hao in the face in public. Now that Wang Hao is dead, Wang Daipen put all the blame on Mu Qiu. Those who dare to offend Shen Glonghui will never have a good end. Explanation. Xiao Hanyan's face turned cold, and her words were also very cold. Your men intended to murder Mu Qiu's team in the ruins, but they were all killed because of their poor skills. Now you come to me to explain. Wang Daipen narrowed his eyes. So, you want to protect that Mu Qiu? A terrifying aura unique to the destruction level strongman emanated from Wang Daipen, which frightened the people on both sides. They could feel that the head of the Shen Glonghui was really angry at this moment. But Xiao Hanyan was not moved at all, looking directly into Wang Daipen's fierce eyes. Remember, Yuhei base is not the one-man show of your Shenlong society, never. As soon as Xiao Hanyan finished speaking, Wang Daipen suddenly laughed wildly. Okay. Since you, Hanyan, are so tolerant of this kid named Mu Qiu, I will let him go this time. The voice was cheerful, but the next second, the tone changed, grinning. But, you have to protect him well. There are dangers everywhere in the city ruins outside. Don't lose a genius because of a momentary negligence. Highly recommend the great novel De Tang, I Became Li Er's Receiver. It's very fierce, and those who like to be CAO thieves can go and have a look. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 110. Hearing Wang Daipen's arrogant words with a threatening tone, Xiao Hanyan narrowed her cold eyes. What do you want to do? Wang Daipen smacked his lips and smiled. I'm just kindly reminding you, Hanyan, don't misunderstand anything, but speaking of it. You care so much about that boy, are you attracted to that pretty boy? Xiao Hanyan's face was normal. If this is your excuse to avoid the facts, it's really a bit inferior. What she really cares about is Mu Qiu's talent to grow into a destructive level. The real purpose of this Queen of Yuhei is to use this emerging force to break the three-party alliance of Yuhei. The meeting at the top did not last long. The main content of the meeting was still aimed at the mysterious Evernight organization and the redemption plan that has not yet been clarified. The biggest loss of the attack on Yuhei base last night was the damage to the laboratory building and the assassinated scientific researchers, but this is far from causing Yuhei to suffer serious injuries. Yuhei's real trump card has not been used by them yet. It is precisely because they know the details of the base that the top leaders including Wang Daipen and Zhang Qinggui can be at ease, otherwise they would not have watched the destruction of the Jade Sea where they lived. After leaving the high-rise building, Wang Daipen and his men walked to the parking lot, where his specially modified flame locomotive was. You mean, that Mu Qiu only has A-level strength but defeated Shadow? Shadow is an S-level awakener under Wang Daipen, and he knows his strength very well. Although Shadow's ability is not outstanding among S-level, it is not something that can be defeated by just an A-level awakener. The subordinate beside him answered, yes. After Mu Qiu pulled out a giant sword from the chest of the woman named Yui, his energy continued to rise, and finally reached the S-level with the blessing of the sword. A giant sword that can bless supernatural powers. Wang Daipen licked his lips. He was able to bless an A-level awakener to the S-level. He suddenly became interested in the girl named Yui. Find a chance to test the girl for me. I really want to see what kind of power the giant sword has. A trace of greed flashed across Wang Daipen's face. He was very interested in everything that could enhance his strength. The subordinates beside him hurriedly responded, but heard Wang Daipen continue to say, and that Mu Qiu, keep a close eye on that kid's whereabouts, especially after leaving the base. The overlord of the Yuhei base finally showed his fangs, and Wang Daipen's eyes were full of madness. Even if Xiao Hanyan protects him, it's useless. I want him to know the consequences of daring to provoke Shen Glonghui. Even if Wang Hao is dead, Wang Daipen must settle this account. The body exudes a unique destructive level terrifying aura, and the breathing of the subordinates beside him becomes a little rapid. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, the reputation of Shen Glonghui has always been the domineering one in Yuhei. This Mu Qiu is one of the few people who dare to pull Wang Daipen's beard and still be safe and sound. The subordinate's forehead is sweating, and he knows the consequences of Wang Daipen's anger. This awakener named Mu Qiu may not have much chance to survive. Mu Qiu, wearing a black windbreaker, walked slowly along the street west of Yuhei City. After a day of cleaning, traces of artillery fire can still be seen in the base, and the smoke in the air lingers for a long time. Survivors are cleaning up blood and corpses on both sides from time to time. This is a relatively easy job they can do and they can get a good reward. Walking to the door of an abandoned coffee shop, Mu Qiu pushed open the door of the coffee shop. This is where the team met before leaving the base. The layout of the store is still the same as before, and some tables and chairs are even covered with dust. A pretty girl in a white apron is in front of the counter, mixing a cup of hot coffee in her hand. Seeing Mu Qiu approaching, Wei Linger smiled, "Here, it's a good time to try my new coffee." Mu Qiu sat down at the counter, took the coffee and took a sip, and then heard Wei Linger sigh, "This is the first time that the base has been attacked from the inside. I have to say that Shura is really scary. He can leave calmly after taking Wang Daipen's attack." Mu Qiu smiled and said, "I don't think that Shura is so powerful." Wei Linger rolled her eyes at Mu Qiu, "Don't come on, it's because you haven't fought against that Shura, otherwise you would know how powerful he is." When Wei Linger thought of the powerful aura when she first met Shura in Lannan City that day, coupled with the flame collision that illuminated the entire base in the experimental building last night, she had already defined Shura as a first-level dangerous person in her heart. The girl patted her chest and said fearfully, "Now my brother and others are searching for clues about Yanjai Shura with all their strength, but this force seems to have suddenly appeared, and it doesn't matter at present." Mu Qiu held the coffee cup and smiled without saying a word. Seeing Mu Qiu's calmness, Wei Linger was furious and said angrily, "You are still so leisurely, do you know that you are in big trouble?" "Oh? What do you mean?" Wei Linger looked directly at Mu Qiu and said, "Wang Daipen has already set his sights on you. You have Sister Hanyan to protect you in the base, but with the revengeful character of that lunatic Wang Daipen, he will definitely find a way to kill you once you leave the base." Mu Qiu chuckled and said, "So this is why you called me out alone." Wei Linger blushed and explained, Sister Hanyan has already told you not to go out of the base during this period of time, so as not to let that lunatic Wang Daipen find a chance to deal with you. After saying this, Wei Linger stared at Mu Chiu's expression. Stopping the search outside means cutting off the main source of income as an awakener. Wei Linger was worried that Mu Chiu would feel disappointed, so she hurriedly said, "But you don't have to worry about losing your job. Sister Hanyan asked me to find a new task for you." "What task?" "I don't know. Are you interested in being a teacher?" "Oh." Mu Chiu had been sipping his coffee with his head down, but when he heard Wei Linger's words, he raised his head with a playful look in his eyes. I updated 3 chapters today. I wonder who will say I am short."